We'll begin episode 51 at the Black Pyramid. So in the tomb chamber, we see Mumm-ra looking at the cauldron. He pleaded a case. He said that every time he tries to come up with a plan, it always backfires on him because of Lionel and his Sword of Omens. Plus, on top of that, Lionel has to call his friends whenever he needed them, and in Mumm-ra's case, he's not wrong. So, according to Mumm-ra, as we go back 17 episodes ago in episode 34, how Lionel and his friends had defeated Spidera in the Kingdom of Webs. Then, long story short, after Mumm-ra continues to plead a case, we go back to 31 episodes ago in episode 20. It was at the time that Lionel not only rescues his friends just in time, but he also defeated the Plundorian robot. Then last but not least, we go back to 29 episodes ago when at the time Mumm-ra had tricked Lionel into going into the astral world where he'd be imprisoned forever. It was at the time when he disguised himself as a nether witch. But guess what? When Lionel came back, but this time with the help of the magician that he set free and along with his spiritual mentor Jaga, that's when the plan backfired. And as for the mutants, they were defeated. Now that Lionel has returned, just in the nick of time. So anyway, back in the present, in the Black Pyramid's tomb chamber, that's when Murmur said there must be a way to get rid of that sword and its power once and for all, because as always, as any bad guy would do, he has a plan. So he asked his ancient spirits of evil if there's a way of doing it. And as Mumm-ra, as he says in his case when he told the ancient spirits of evil, if there's a will, there's a way. So the ancient spirits of evil told him the good news. There just might be a way. And they said, there's a legendary sword that could do the job. So the ancient spirits of evil had told Mumm-ra, and they also didn't hesitate the sword's name and its origin and where it came from. They said, there's a sword called the Excalibur, and it's been made by the most legendary wizard of all time, Merlin, that was once a companion by a man named King Arthur. The ancient spirits of evil in the present scene continued to tell Mumm-ra that back in the day, during the medieval period, the time of the reign of King Arthur, it was Merlin who had pleaded the case that while there was war and everything else that was going on, that's when Merlin pleaded a case to say that whoever takes the sword from the stone itself would not only defend the entire kingdom, but the sword itself, the Excalibur that is, will stand for peace, harmony, and prosperity. So that's exactly what happened when Arthur, who plucked the sword from his stone, he not only ruled the entire kingdom, but he had a wife once upon a time, Guinevere. And he also has the band of knights of the Round Table. So, for a while, thanks to King Arthur and his band of knights, peace restored the land. But not for long, until when King Arthur found out that Guinevere has been kidnapped by the Black Knight, it was now up to him to rescue her, or so that's the case. So Guinevere tries to be supportive to Arthur by warning him that every time every knight tries to rescue her, they failed. So she told him to save himself, but when Arthur refused, that's when he went one on one with the Black Knight who had kidnapped her. So both he, Arthur, and the Black Knight began battling with each other. As both King Arthur and the Black Knight having a sword combat, and it just went on and on and on and on and on. Until finally at last King Arthur won. Then, after a long story short, that the Black Knight has been successfully defeated thanks to King Arthur, his castle had disintegrated. So, yes, it's true. It is thanks to him that Queen Guinevere is saved and peace had been prospered throughout the land once again. So, anyway, back in the present with Mumm-ra in the Black Pyramid's tomb chamber, he now is asking his spirits of evil, how can he possess this kind of sword anyway? So, Monroe's spirits of evil was more than happy to answer his question. And that's when flashback, they told Monroe that when King Arthur's reign came to an end, one of his knights of the Round Table decided to return Excalibur to its proper place. So, what better way to have Excalibur was to be left with the Lady of the Lake, where she held it to this very day. What Mumm-ra wanted to know from his spirits of evil if Excalibur should defeat the Sword of Omens. Well, to answer Mumm-ra's question, that's when the spirits of evil told him that Excalibur is indeed very well known and the most powerful sword there is. Then Mumm-ra's spirits of evil says, but there is a catch. Only King Arthur can possess this kind of sword when he comes back to reclaim his kingdom, they said. So back with Mumm-ra, after he thought about what his agent spirits of evil said about King Arthur and his return to reclaim his kingdom someday, so Mumm-ra thought, And then light bulb, you know what this means. Mumm-ra, thanks to his spirits of evil story about King Arthur, he came up with an idea. So the first thing he did, as any bagger would do, as always, he transforms himself into his monstrous form first. Then he came up with a disguise as the legendary King Arthur. So that's what he did. So Mumm-ra, now disguised as the legendary King Arthur, he leaves the pyramid for the first time. On a horse, of course. And so what he did is he goes to the lake where the Lady of the Lake resides, just like what his spirits of evil said. And that way, he can get the sword of Excalibur itself, just like what the real King Arthur did. Well, you're probably wondering, why did he need such a sword? Well, he figured, Mumm-ra that is, that if King Arthur should have a sword like the Excalibur, then so should Mumm-ra. And as anyone will tell you, it was all part of his plan. So when Mumm-ra, disguised as King Arthur, told the Lady of the Lake that he has come back for his sword, or so she thought, that's when the Lady of the Lake had obliged to give King Arthur the sword, or so she thought. But the Lady of the Lake had no idea that King Arthur was a fake and that he was Mumm-ra in disguise. And speaking of which, he's now on his mission. So meanwhile at Cat's Lair, so in the control room, we have Panthro, Tigra, Lionel, and Snarf. And they just saw on the screen that there was someone there in front of the lair outside. It's the legendary King Arthur, or so they thought. So long story short, back with King Arthur, who was outside of the lair. So what Lionel did is that after he was asking who he is, so what King Arthur did is that he pleaded a case to ask a question. Is this how you greet me? After I just came back from time to fight for truth, justice, honor, and loyalty, he asked. Then Lionel sensed that something was off. That's the code of Thundera, the one that the Thundercats had served so well. So then it's Panthro's turn to ask King Arthur a question. How do you know about it? Well, King Arthur claims a case to say that their mentor, Jaga, once upon a time, has sent King Arthur on a mission to fight for their cause to get rid of Mumm-ra, or so he claims. So I forgot to mention that takes place in the control room when Panther asked a question. So then it's Lionel's turn to ask King Arthur a question. If what you're saying is true, but before he could finish the question, that's when King Arthur asked a question. You doubt my word, even from a knight such as myself? Then Lionel has his turn to plead a case to answer a question. He says, we don't mean any offense. We're more than happy to welcome anyone that will join us for a cause, he said. So after Lionel pleaded the case, that's when King Arthur went off the horse and jumped right off of Lionel's shoulder, and so he apologized. So back inside of the lair, but this time in the meeting room, we have Tigra, Lionel, Panthro, and Snarf, and of course King Arthur. So after King Arthur sits in the chair in the meeting room, Snarf was more than happy to take his sword, but King Arthur refused and struck Snarf. When Lionel saw what had happened, that's when King Arthur apologized and said, oh my goodness, I forgot to tell you. I can't let anyone take my sword Excalibur, he said. Then King Arthur just asked Lionel a question. You do understand, right? Right, Lionel said. Then King Arthur pleaded his next case to ask Lionel a question. You do have a sword, right? Well, according to Lionel, when he was asked by King Arthur if he would see it, but then King Arthur changed his mind and says, never mind. I pretty much can see that the Sword of Omens is actually no match for Excalibur anyway. he said. So after long story short, Snarf had pleaded a case with King Arthur to say that is the sword of omens after all. So it is, King Arthur said. So he's asking Lionel a question. Are you trained to be a knight or something? Then Lionel's trying to plead a case to King Arthur to say, listen, stranger, I don't know who you are and what you're up to and where you're coming from. But then Panthro cuts him off and says, now take it easy. After all, this stranger is our guest after all. Panthro's not kidding. Then King Arthur asked the question, shouldn't someone watch my horse for me? That's when Snarf knew that something was off with him and he doesn't know why. So after Snarf asked the question, are we going to let him get away with this? That's when Lionel continues to plead a case with King Arthur, or so he thought. You are rubbing people the wrong way. You do realize that, Lionel said. Then Lionel continues to plead a case with King Arthur, or so he thought, by saying, if you wish to join in our cause, join your cause, you say? King Arthur asked, and he just laughs and scoffs at it. I thought that's what you came here for. That's why you're here, right? Lionel asked. I came to fight for you, King Arthur said. Well, I don't think you understand, Lionel said. I don't think you have much of a choice, King Arthur. From now on, you and your friends must fight under my banner, not yours. Well, that just made Lionel very upset. So Lionel says, wait a minute. And then King Arthur cuts him off by pleading his case. You mean you're going to argue with me? King Arthur asked. And then Lionel was about to plead his case when once again King Arthur, or so he thought, had interrupted him. So be it then, King Arthur says. Let's see if your sword can speak itself for you. And so what King Arthur did, or so Lionel thought, was he slapped him in the face, with the glove, of course. So before King Arthur can leave the meeting room, and that's when he continues to plead a case with Lionel, unless your courage fails you, we'll meet at sunrise, he said. And so he leaves the meeting room. Meanwhile, outside of Castle, King Arthur was still waiting for Lionel to show up before sunrise. Inside we see Panther, Chitara, and Tigra. So Panther was asking, where is Lionel anyway? Don't worry, Tigra said, he'll show up soon. Then Chitara speaks in her case to say, I think this whole thing is ridiculous. You know what I think? I think Lionel's fighting for his own pride or something, she said. So Panthro has his turn to plead a case to Chitara that Lionel doesn't have a choice. That's not true, Chitara says. Lionel does have a choice, she said. According to Chitara, she said that Lionel could have just walked away, but instead he was sinking to this madman's level. Back outside with the fake King Arthur, which the Thundercats are not aware of, he just pleaded a case to say that maybe Lionel isn't showing up after all. He's just not courageable enough. I wouldn't say that just yet, Snarf said, but guess who decided to show up? It's Lionel. And guess what he did? He borrowed one of the unicorns from the unicorn forest. No wonder he was delayed. Long story short, watching in a window from the lair are Panthro, Chitara, and Tigra. Still, neither of the Thundercats are aware that the King Arthur that Lionel was challenging is a fake. So the jousting went on as planned. And as both King Arthur and Lionel continues to go forward with the jousting, that's when both of the lances collided. Well, King Arthur's lance broke, but Lionel's didn't. So when Lionel came to the other side and with his lance intact, he told King Arthur, or so he thought, that honor is, however, satisfied and restored. So after Lionel pleaded a case with King Arthur to say that the jousting is over, it'll be over once I get my lance, King Arthur said, and so he did. So after long story short, Lionel had threw King Arthur a lance, and after King Arthur picks it up, it is now time for round two of the joust. So once again, it went just the way as planned. However, when both of their lances collided, but this time their lances not only flung right up into the air, but they were both being thrown off. First King Arthur, then Lionel, and they both fell on the ground on their backs. So now that both the horse and the unicorn moved out of the way, that's when King Arthur decided to have a sword combat with Lionel instead. So that's what he did. By the time that King Arthur pulled out his sword at Excalibur, that's when Lionel knew. And so he dodges King Arthur's attack, so now it's Lionel's turn. So after a long story short, the Sword of Omens and the Excalibur has shown their powers to each other by both of their owners. That's when both King Arthur and Lionel collided their swords together. And it just went on and on and on and on and on. Long story short, back inside the lair, still watching it happen were Chitara, Tiger, and Panthro. That's when Chitara panicked and said, "We had to do something about this to stop the fight." "We can't," Panthro said. "Lionel got himself into this mess. He can get himself out." Then Tiger has his turn to not only agree with Panthro, but he says in his case that Lionel will never forgive the Thundercats if they try to intervene in the fight. So back outside the lair were Lionel and King Arthur, or so the Thundercats thought. They continued to have a sword combat with each other, and it just went on and on and on and on and on. And then by surprise, what happened next was unbelievable. Both the Excalibur and the Sword of Omens went out of their owner's hands and went right into the air, and they continued to claim each other in midair. Now that's interesting. Still watching in the window, long story short, are the Thundercats, Panthro, Tigra, and Chitara, and they never seen anything like it before. So back with the two swords outside still combating with each other, the Sword of Omens and the Excalibur themselves, and it just went on and on and on and on and on. But unfortunately, tragedy struck, because as the two swords are still flying in the air, but unfortunately not for long, because the Excalibur's blade just pierced the eye of Thundera, and when it happened, all the Thundercats insignias were gone on Panthro, Chitara, and Tigra, the cat's lair, and then finally Lionel. Yes, things look pretty grim. If that's not bad enough, as the Excalibur's blade was in the ground, that's when, as Lionel is still unconscious at the moment, he should have realized right then that that laugh belongs to Mumm-ra. So, unfortunately, Lionel should have realized that Mumm-ra was King Arthur in disguise. If things weren't bad enough, that's when Mumm-ra had pleaded a case to let slip to Lionel that it was me and the sword Excalibur itself. And it's thanks to that that the sword's power, meaning the sword of omens, is no more. So that means in Mumm-ra's case, he's going to rule through Earth thanks to Excalibur, since it did the job. But now here comes a problem. Mumm-ra just couldn't get the sword out of the ground. And it seems from Mumm-ra, disguised as King Arthur, no matter how many times he tried to pull and pull and pull, the sword just wouldn't budge. But wait, that's not all. Because of the Excalibur's sword power, I guess Mumm-ra forgot to realize as to how powerful it must be. So it went from a King Arthur disguise back to his mummified form. Then what Mumm-ra saw next was unbelievable. It's Merlin, the same magician that the spirits of evil had told him about back at the Black Pyramid's tomb chamber. Then Merlin just asked Mumm-ra a question. "Do you really think the Excalibur's going to obey you and to do your evil, ruthless deeds?" So what Merlin did next is that he pulled the sword out of the ground and then tells Mumm-ra that your reign of glory is now over. So go back to your pyramid where you belong, he said. So you know what that means. That means that Mumm-ra had failed to remember there is one simple flaw, that the sword of Excalibur will never give in to the ruthless methods, especially by the evil deeds of Mumm-ra's. So this time it was Merlin who saved the day. So after Mumm-ra once again goes back to his pyramid knowing that the plan failed, so it's up to Merlin to restore all the insignias of the Thundercats, Dino, Panther, Chitara, and Tigra, the cat's lair, and last but not least, the Sword of Omens itself. Oh, by the way, back with Snarf, now that he realizes that his companion not only got his insignia restored, he was glad to see that he's okay, thanks to Merlin who saved him. Well, him and his friends. So now that everything is restored, thanks to Merlin who introduced himself to Lionel. And then when Merlin had handed the sword of Excalibur to Lionel, he says, "Here, take it. It belongs to you." So what Lionel wanted to know from Merlin, where did Mumm-ra get the sword from anyway? I forgot to mention it was after Merlin just told Lionel that it's Lionel's decision on the sword's fate itself. That's when by surprise Merlin just let slip to Lionel. He said that just moments ago, Mumm-ra just got it from the Lady of the Lake by disguising himself as King Arthur. And up until now, Merlin had explained further that the Lady of the Lake had no idea that that King Arthur was a fake. So Merlin just told Lionel even further that the Lady of the Lake had guarded the sword for thousands of years, and there it remains since. So now that Lionel knew the truth thanks to Merlin, and that's when Lionel made his decision clear to Merlin. Return Excalibur to its proper place where it belongs. Besides, we've already got a store that will stand for truth, justice, honor, and loyalty. So now that Merlin had learned the truth from Lionel, so he says, then so be it. So after that, he heads off and did what Lionel said to do, return Excalibur to its proper place where no evil hands can ever get their hands on it again, especially Mumm-ra. Too bad. His plan almost worked, but unfortunately it backfired. So meanwhile, back at Cat's lair, Lionel did what any good guy would do, look through his sword's eye to tell him what happened. So he did. Remember Merlin that had just left Cat's lair moments ago? He was about to return his sword Excalibur to the Lady of the Lake. So, while that happens, back with Snarf, he wanted to ask Lionel a question. He asked him why couldn't he keep the sword Excalibur? So to answer Snarf's question, that's when Lionel tells him that he did what was necessary. Excalibur must be returned, and so it did. But you could have kept it, Snarf said. You won, he said. Then Snarf also said that before Merlin left, he had given him the sword. But in omission by confession, Lionel says that Merlin didn't, and the reason why is because Merlin has given Lionel the decision of what to do with it. So he did. When Snarf asked him why he felt it was necessary, it's because what Lionel said to Snarf is absolutely true. He really didn't earn the sword of Excalibur to begin with. But you defeated Mumm-ra, Snarf says. Isn't that not true? Of course it's true, Lionel said. And of course Lionel felt guilt-ridden about it because he didn't want to fight him to begin with. Also, in omission by confession, Lionel admitted that what Chitara had said earlier was true, and he just let his own pride get the best of him, and so that explains why his own pride was his own downfall. In other words, Lionel confessed that he should have listened to Chitara, and now he wished he had, and maybe, just maybe, someday he'll learn to control it, but until that day comes and when that day comes, he'll have a long way to go. So, what Lionel did was that he continued to look through his sword's eye to tell him what happened next. So, Merlin, through Lionel's sword of Omen's eye, did what he was supposed to do. He threw the sword of Excalibur where the Lady of the Lake catches it, and it goes right back into the lake where it belongs, like the way it's supposed to have been the first time. So you know what this means. It's true that Lionel did learn his lesson that day. So once again, the victory belongs to the Thundercats. So that ends episode 51.